Good evening, everyone. Ellen Sutter of ESP Presents and ESP Book Chats. We'll bring page turners your way. Today, our guest is Dr. Anissa Short. We're talking about her book, Why I Said Yes. It's 10 clues that give me clarity before commitment. Dr. Anissa, you can come on out and say hello to the folks here. Tell us about yourself and why you penned this book.
Hi, Miss Ellen. Thank you again for this opportunity. Hello, everyone. As I already shared, I am Dr. Anissa Short, the success strategist and the director of the Chosen Pen Group. My mission is to support others by amplifying their voices by way of publishing their signature book, featuring them on my podcast platform, and being their number one supporter and cheerleader and coach. And so, this particular book, Miss Ellen, is really personal. I've authored several books, many of which all of which rather support women in business. I'm like the biggest cheerleader. That's just a part of who I am. That's what I've been called to. Women, period. Women that are entrepreneurs. And so this particular book, however, differs from the others in that while it is geared towards the female population, it's more of a private journey into my life. I share a little bit about my journey, meeting my husband, and now being married 28 years. But I don't just share our story. I provide wisdom nuggets that were passed on to me that served me well in making the decision to say yes to being his wife. And so I offer my story as a reflection on who we are and how we came about, but I also offer advice as one sister friend to another.
Love it, love it, love it in a wonderful nutshell. I did read your story, and again, I'm Ellen Sutter of ESP Presents and ESP Book Chats, where we bring page turners your way. I have other shows, but this show right here is what we call a cliffhanger show. We just simply read your synopsis, and maybe if we get the book, we sometimes just go synopsis only. But if we get the book, we'll do like the first couple of pages, not to give the story away, and again, as a cliffhanger to engage with the readers. So, in reading your book, the parts that I've read, you open it up and you talk about uh, your working environment. I'll just say it that way. That's the best way I can, and how you would travel out because of your work. And then you've seen Mr. Shorts in a glimpse of him. And I like how you say in your book that not only that you develop a relationship, but there's clarity. Let's start with that. How does a woman, from your experiences, your own point of view, bring clarity to a relationship that may be a potential one down the way, just a glimpse of engaging with each other? How do you say to yourself and to that audience, let's bring some clarity?
Well, I really believe that, of course, thank you for the question. I really believe that clarity begins with the individual setting the standard for themselves, not just by happenstance falling into a relationship situation, but understanding for themselves what their parameters are, what their standard is, so that as they become acquainted with a potential significant other, whether it be male or female, certain things you just don't have to engage in, because if they don't meet the standard, the baseline, you build on the standard. It's like the foundation for what a relationship was. And I made reference in my chapter. One of my standards was I didn't fraternize at work and I didn't fraternize on business. So when I met him at a conference amongst many other individuals, it wasn't about a hookup for me. It was just about meeting people. And so for that reason, I had some apprehension when he allowed himself to be introduced from a different perspective. But I really believe, in answering to your question, is that we must set a standard for ourselves. We must set our own value, our own baseline, our own foundation, and make sure that that foundation is something substantive, not just superficial. Not to say that the superficial doesn't count, but that shouldn't be the baseline. It has to be
I
something
know
more solid.
that is so true. I know in reading your book too, Anissa, I've seen myself in this way that when I met my husband, I met him in 1988. We married in 92. And so when I met my husband and I seen a glimpse of what you said, you wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't looking for anybody. I didn't have a checklist. Did you have a checklist or what type of man
No,
you want? I didn't have a checklist either,
no,
other than I wanted him tall, dark, and he could be handsome. And even if he wasn't handsome, that wasn't the real thing, but you do want to have some
I
looks.
know.
And so I thought about that. I was like, I wasn't looking for anybody. I was torn, broken. I didn't want to hear, you look so good. You look must have fell from heaven. I didn't want those type of
No, I
cliche
did.
things. And so all my husband said to me was, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you hold my camera bag?" And so in holding that camera bag, it was an expensive camera bag. It was one of those Minolta cameras with the long nose, just small
Yeah,
camera. And he trusted me with that camera. I could have walked out the door, anything like that. In your case, I would say that, and this is me saying, and you can check me on this, your check fact list. You said in your case that there was a person, cashier, if you would, was thought you guys were together, and you was like, no, no, we're not together. And then he kind of said, uh, she don't know yet, paraphrasely. So
that's
what
exactly.
was that? What was that like for you? What was the comfortability for you in almost swallowing what he was saying?
It was it was humorous but frustrating simultaneously because, mind you, at this point I had been at the conference several days. He and I had just become acquainted the night before amongst another group of folk, so it wasn't like we ran into each other individually. We were in groups of 6 to 8, and we did things together after the conference to go to dinner, things like that, and go shopping. So I had been somewhat acquainted with him and knew he had a sense of humor. So when the lady assumed, because she had seen me so many times in this particular store, we were ready to make our final purchases. She assumed that he was my spouse because we were together. Now, looking back, I could see how that must have looked. She's seen me all the time, and now it's the last day. Now I have a guy with me, and I said, "No, he's here at the conference as well." And then she goes, "Oh," I said, "No, I've just met him." He says, "What she means is we haven't known each other long." And I'm like, "No, I meant what I just said. So that's how we
You.
I was like, "No, I meant what I just said." And she says, "Oh, I thought you all were a couple." I said, "No, ma'am, I do." And he says, "What she means is we're not a couple yet." I'm like, "Why do you keep doing this?" And my husband has a very stoic face, so you don't know if
Hmm.
he's joking or not. And then he started laughing too. I said, "That wasn't funny. That was not funny." So it was ha ha ha, but at the same time, it was like, "Stop lying. What is wrong with you?" That kind of thing.
Let's go back when you mentioned boundaries. I want to say, like, and this is just from my point of view, I see that people have boundaries after they've been scarred. Women have it after they've been
Right.
scarred. Then they make this superficial, highly protected wall that they will not do this again. And it becomes their boundaries from what they had gone through. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Right.
And then yours is a little different because you said you had some things like what you said in the book. They will see like those different standards, like you were saying that you guys were in a long distance relationship. I don't know if they say this, but the kids call it a LDR, long distance relationship.
Okay, yeah, but that's what it was. It was an LDR.
Not a
I didn't
down
know what
low,
was the acronym
LDR.
for it, but it was an LDR, yes.
And so you said it was 8 miles. And so you mentioned also, you said 8 miles, that was the distance apart. And you mentioned that was before social media. You had to do the old fashioned way. First, you established a relationship. Y'all did handwriting notes, and you said it was costly on the payphone. And then there was a steadfast faith in each other. Now, my husband, he was military. When he met, he recruited me, and I was like, no, I don't want to be with you because you're military and you could have a woman in every state, and
Yeah.
I don't really want that. And so it worked out for me, especially when I told you that I was heartbroken and scarred. And so when he
Hmm.
went away, and you said it fortified your relationship, the distance, and that was for us too. It gave me time to think about him. At that time, we didn't have social media, so when you wrote a
Right.
letter, they may not have gotten it to 45 days later. So you mentioned that like absent make the heart grow fonder. Tell us about that long distance relationship, and how
Relationship.
you told us, with writing and doing all that, how faithful were you? And then this is going to be a two-part. So how faithful were you to committed to that long distance in writing? And then what was it that you, to me, and as a reader, what was the guard you had up and saying no? The foundation, did it come from like uh some brokenness? And it doesn't have to, but what was
Well,
that foundation that gave you that heart that I'm going to put this up and this is definitely not what I'm going to do? I'm going to be true to myself.
well, that's a very valid question, and I appreciate the ask. But so to give you a backstory, a year prior to actually meeting my husband, my now husband, at the conference, I ended a relationship. I was
Okay.
engaged to be married. And in being engaged to be married, not only did I break off the engagement, I ended the relationship. So at the time in which I met my husband a year later, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I had ended one a year prior. I had relocated to a different city. I had bought a home, or was in the process of buying a home. So my mind was really pretty much about regrouping and just enjoying my single life. I wasn't really,
Mm.
so I didn't have any. I had walls, but my walls were more so that I had zero tolerance for foolishness. So I didn't want, I wasn't a casual dater. I don't the Netflix and chill, that wasn't the phrase then. That I didn't entertain that. I was a homebody. My weekends consisted of either going to visit my family or hang out with my girlfriends. We would do basketball games and football games and things of that nature. So I was very content. So at the time in which I met my husband, I felt like I was in a good place. I was not looking for a relationship. I was happily single. Seriously though. So the guard was not so much that I was scarred or in a bad place. I was in a sense in that I was very tunnel vision. I'm going on with my career. I'm not letting anything, hold me back. I'm buying my home. And my attitude was, God, if you send a man my way and I get married, then great. But if not, I'm gonna be happy by myself. That was just kind of my attitude. The second part of that is in meeting Alfonso, he and I became colleagues, acquaintances. So in my mind's eye, he was no different than anyone else I met, whether it be male or female. Some of the men I didn't engage with, but we all exchanged business cards. We all were in the same agency in different divisions through different parts of the United States. So we became more connected through email and instant messaging through work. And that's how it was with Alfonso. So the messages that he would send to me, like good morning or a positive quote for the day and things of that nature, would also send to other people because I was a part of a thread. So I never looked at it as if I was being targeted per se. He just became a colleague. And eventually over time, because of the interaction, I felt comfortable with him. Now, we were 800 miles apart, 800, right? And eventually, I felt comfortable enough with him to give him my personal number. Now, to be honest with you, Miss Ellen, I don't know when I did that because I didn't give up. If you were work related, you call me at work. I need to talk to you after hours. But I gave him my number, and he would call me occasionally at home after work. Nothing forward. What was your day like? What was your weekend like? Did you watch the game last night? What you got planned for the weekend? Those were the types of conversations. And it wasn't until maybe, I don't know, 2 months in, 3 months in of that, I went, I think he liked me. I mean, like me. And then I called my friend who was also at the conference when we met. And I said, he's been calling me and I think he likes me. And she goes, duh, he has liked you since day one. And I'm like, you think so? And she was like, Anissa, what is wrong with you? So, and then I asked him, crazy, I said, I think I'm beginning to feel a little uncomfortable with your calling so often. Because I think you want more than I'm willing to give. And he was apologetic for making me feel uncomfortable because that was not his plan. He said, but I will say, I would like to get to know you better. And I was like, oh, this is not gonna work. I'm not doing this 800 miles. No, I couldn't trust Joe Blow that was just 40 minutes up the road, much less about 800. No, that's not gonna happen. But he asked me to be open to the possibility, and I had no reason not to, other than the distance, because mind you, at this point, it's been 4 months in. We've established a relationship. We've had a lot of cordial conversation. He's never said anything disrespectful. Everybody loved him because of his personality. He was known as a great guy. So I really had nothing legitimate to say no to other than distance. So I think he just slow walked me down, Miss Ellen. He just kind of he just kind of gradually won me over is what happened. It really was. He would not take no for an answer.
I'm hearing that men know exact. I'm hearing from men. They know who exactly if they want. They know exactly if they
Yeah,
want that person or not, and he
right.
knew that he wanted you. And then you said that it was going forward now, 28 years later, and you talked about him being intentional, you being intentional. And I know what I'm hearing from all ages, whether they're in the 80s babies, our age group. I don't know if you're in my age group, I'm in my 60s. And so the age group of, and then going down 50s and stuff, that the dating pool stinks.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know. I've been married 35, 34 years. 34 years I've been married now. So I don't know about that. It's not my daughters, they're in their 30s. It's not like, the intentional man. We have sounds like you have a traditional man as well. And
Hmm.
so it's very challenging in that way.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, as we're going to get through, I'm going to reset first, but as we get back to, you have a session that says, um, that talks about behind the power of your yes. So we'll talk about that, but I'm going to reset again. I'm Ellen Sutter, the ESP Presents and Book Chats, where we bring page turners your way. I have Anissa Short, who is here today, Dr. Anissa Short, and we're talking about her book, Why. Now I'm going to tell you it is Why I Said Yes, and it's a book that she has 10 clues that gave her, me, you, clarity before commitment. And I like the way you say clarity before commitment. And you talked about these things. There's four components that you talked about in your book. And you talked about um, how I know the expectation is realistic. How do I know? So in saying that, how do you, or within your wheelhouse, how does this woman know? And what made me think too about this is it might be my own. I have three daughters. The oldest one is 40, 38, and the 36-year-old is going to turn 37 this month.
Okay.
And I have a 29-year-old son, so the son popped in on the end. So just from talking, I mostly talk with, because she's with me, my 36, almost 37-year-old. We talk about a person trying, thinking about getting into a relationship and different things like that. So I mentioned to her, I wonder, we have wonderful talks, and I'm mentioning this to you, is like when you say, how do you know the expectation or if it's realistic? Are women, and this is only your point of view,
Okay.
I had to wonder if women are looking toward relationship out of necessity, out of loneliness, and maybe that they have children and they just want a complete family. So in that view or that landscape, are we looking in out of those expectations to become our realistic view of how we know that this is realistic to us? If that make
Right.
any sense to you?
No, that makes sense. It's a very valid question, and I think based on what I've seen, let me say it that way, that all of what you offer or what you mentioned are reasons for why women are motivated to finding quote the right man. But if I'm looking simply for someone to be a good father figure for my children because I'm a single mom, but he
Mhm.
doesn't treat me with respect, he's better to the children than he is me, then why am I disappointed when he doesn't treat me well? Was that really your priority? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Was that your primary focus? If I'm lonely and I want companionship, then I just want someone to fill the void so that I don't feel lonely. But what other criteria are you using for that other than just say seeking or making yourself available based on the loneliness? I think um, I don't want to say think. I believe sometimes our priorities get misconstrued as to
Mm-hmm.
what is the higher value option. The higher value option. I'm not saying it's not of value to want a nuclear family with a husband and taking husband, wife, and children. I'm not saying that it's not there's something wrong with having some a companion to spend the rest of your life with. I understand that the
Mm-hmm.
desire of that. However, if that is your only value, what else do you have that ranks higher? For me, as an individual, I wanted him to respect me as a person. I wanted him to admire my accomplishments rather than be intimidated by my
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments.
Love
I
it.
wanted him to see me as an equal partner, someone that we could build a life together, not someone that was going to be his servant. He's looking at me as somebody that benefits him, but he brings nothing to the table. My faith was had high value on faith, so he needed to be a man who shared my faith. That was important to me. And then all the other things, him having a good job, him having a great sense of humor, making me laugh, him being a decent, a good looking man, that was all fine and good. But if those other things were absent, then have I sold myself cheap? Have I sold myself? Have I undervalued myself? Let me say it that way. And so I'm not saying that the things that many of the women want are not good things, because they are. But if that's our only lens by which we look for companionship, we are not doing ourselves due diligence. We're not doing due diligence, I believe. That's just me. And that's one of the reasons why I felt like even in sharing my story, I wanted to offer those nuggets, because I wanted to remind them I didn't just take what Alfonso said for face value, what he said. I watched him, I observed him. His actions were consistent to what he said. Not only just him, but I saw how others around him referred to him, his co-workers, his colleagues, you know, things of that. Those were the extraneous variables. He treated all ladies he was he was almost, people called him a Casanova because he was a gentleman. He held the door for all the women. Everybody thought he was, oh, he's a great guy. And even some of the guys would say that, if I had a sister, then I would want you to date my sister because of the type of, you're upstanding guy, that kind of thing. So I do believe sometimes life happens and we go through crises and we go through challenges and we go through disappointment, and we want to fill those voids. But if that becomes the only lens that we look to for companionship, we um we have undervalued ourselves.
I believe that. You probably see me disappear a little bit. I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening to me, but I was able to come back. The cyber world kicked me back. And I did hear what you said, and I can see it here on my phone as well. And that's one of the components that you talk about, and then there's four total. And so the second component that you had talked about, how will I know if he is the one? How would I know? And again, those realistic things of making a list, you know, about the type of man. And I asked you that before we came on air. I never made a list of this type of man, but I see that and I'm not trying to be mean. I see that a lot in single moms, that they create this man that they want their son to be, but really to reflect this man that is, he's just a figment of the imagination. He is
Mhm.
not,
Yeah. Not realistic.
he's not there. He's not realistic, and no
Right.
one can come to that standard. So how do we do that from your point of view, to have some realistic balance and some realistic, I don't know, standards of, sometimes we're just asking a man to be Jesus or to be God, and that's far from what we're going to get.
Miss Sutton, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody might not agree with that. One
Hmm.
of the blessings I had was a father in my home. So
I did
my
too.
dad poured into my sister. I just have one sister. So he poured into us in a humorous way about how we should expect to be treated as a gentleman, as young ladies, and how to carry ourselves as young ladies. But we also saw how he treated our mother. I didn't grow up in a home with a lot of chaos and fighting and fussing. I'm not saying that they didn't fuss, but we never saw it. They were a unified front. I grew up in a family that there were a lot of marriages, long-standing marriages, and that wasn't to
Mm.
say they weren't challenged. in their marriages, but they live. They, my mom and dad today have been married 58 years. My grandmother, when my grandfather died, had been married 50 years. So, I've seen a lot of that. Family, the nuclear family was, and then there are single aunts and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, there were certain base values that I knew that were conducive to a quality life and family. And I believe sometimes we get distracted by the bells and the whistles, the baubles
Mm-hmm.
and the beads. He took me to a nice restaurant. He came, picked me up in this type of car. He had on this kind of suit. He smelled so good. All that's fine. But how does he respect you? How does he treat you? Is he a family man? What are his
Mm-hmm.
values? Do you share the same philosophy when it comes to faith and family? Those types of things. We get blinded by the baubles and the beads, the shiny balls, is what I say. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because of that, when it comes time for us making a list, I didn't really make a list, but I knew in my heart that what I had previously was not what I wanted again. And there was some positive qualities about the previous young man, but I knew that there were other things that were heavy enough for me to know that I'm not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I knew I didn't want to do that again for sure, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that I made a list, but within my heart I knew it was going to be right. But here's the thing for me, Miss Ellen, as I began to entertain the idea of being in a relationship with my husband, he began to reveal some of the things that my father told my sister and I to look for without me saying it. You follow me? I didn't give him a checklist of, well, do you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla? And if he say chocolate, I know he's the one. It wasn't anything like that. It was the things that he did, some of the things that he said, how he responded to me and how he prioritized me. And then I would think about, oh man, I remember daddy said blah blah blah. That was a clue.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
then I knew that it would be virtually impossible for this not to be possibly the one, because my father had already told me. He said, if a guy is interested in you, you don't have to ask him to come see you. He's gonna find a way, make a
Come
way.
on now. Come on
You,
now.
you he won't be ghosting you for 2 or 3 days and you've not heard from him. He says, if even if he doesn't have transportation, he's going to borrow his friend's car, his uncle's
There you
car.
go.
He'll ride a bike. My dad said he would go in reverse on the interstate. He would say little silly things. He says, but you don't ask a man, you don't debate with him about why he's not here. If he's into you, he will be there for you. And Alfonso proved that without me. I didn't tell him. My dad said, if you were really into me, I never did that. He showed it. So I believe that because of the advice I was given through my father and through the things I saw in family growing up, I was able to discern that I really believe he's serious. He could very well be the one. But if no one has shared that with you, you don't know what to look for.
Exactly. And so, like with me too, I was raised in a home with a father. I don't know if I ever told you, but my mom was born deaf. So my dad was the voice in the house, and that's the book that I'm going to be writing about my mom. What my experience was being in a home with a mom that's deaf or a parent that's deaf, and so he was always the voice. He would tell us, "It's 8 girls with me and
Mhm.
3 brothers, so it's 11 of us." And so he treated us girls. He would tell us, different things about guys and stuff like that. But my dad was more of he spoke in parables.
Yeah, yeah,
He's from Jackson, Mississippi, just always spoke in parables, to the way if you listen, there's a lot of nuggets, but if you
yeah.
feel
That's
like
what
you
my
don't have
father was.
time,
Yeah,
he was just always in parables when he talked. And so he never tried to push us to be anything other than, what do you want? Never
yeah,
talk down about us. If you're going to be a
yeah.
bunny rabbit, be the best bunny
Best
rabbit
bunny
you
rabbit
know.
it is, right?
Yeah, he was kind of like that. Whereas my mom's, we did sign and different things like that. And so I think that's very important, because there's a lot of days, as the narrative going forward, that a lot of children and some people, there's no father in the home, and
Right,
I don't know close to me, but I've seen away from me that they become dominant females, and there's a generation of people that hadn't had a man in their lives at all,
yeah,
not even their
right,
father there, never seen him. And so,
right.
yeah, I can see saying that. And you know what? Our time is going fast, but I'm going to push this through. And so you talked about, I may have to skip some. I'm going to go over there and then get to the characteristics that, at least one of the characteristics, because I didn't realize it's almost. it was supposed to be 30 minutes. But you talked about the characteristic, and you said that with your husband, you talked about, again, as I read in there, you were saying he was consistent and who he was on the clock, my words, off the clock. He was truly himself. And you talked about looking at the characteristic. They might be looking nowadays whether he fine, does he have six figures? And I don't think a
Right,
lot of people have six figures, but they're looking at the wrong thing. But you clearly say, look at that character. What kind of characteristics
right.
does he have? And, you know, his approach. I like this. I'm going to try to read it exactly like you said. You said a man's approach will tell you more than his words could ever. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know if I revealed this in the book. I may have. I can't remember now
And I
because I
might not have gotten there yet.
no, you may not. Right. Well, there's a, as time progressed, and Alfonso and I are um in a relationship at this point. When I talked about him being consistent, Alfonso said to me, "I would like to come see you every month if you would allow me to." So I thought, I said, if I would allow you to, he says, yeah, because unless you give me permission, I can't come. And I was
Mm,
like, he wants my permission, that kind of thing. And I was like, well, how are you going to get here? He said, I'll buy a ticket. I'm just going to, and he did. He flew
wow.
in to see me. Then there was the opportunity where he was supposed to come to visit, and there was a snowstorm. He was living in Washington, D.C. At this time, I was living in Mississippi. And so there was a snowstorm. Flights were being canceled. And he called me and he says, I got a problem. The flights are going to be canceled because of the snowstorm. I was like, well, that's okay. I understand. No problem. He was like, well, no,
Mm-hmm.
but I still want to come and see you. And I'm like, well, how are you going to do that? You know, you can't fly. You're not going to drive here, that kind of thing. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, if it's okay with you that I still come, then I'll be there. So here's the thing. He was still a man of his word. Despite the fact that there was this challenge, he was still determined to keep his promise to come see me every single month.
Wow. Wow.
Every single month. And then there were times when I would say, there was, he called and he said, well, I would like to come this weekend if that's okay with you. And I'm like, well, no, I can't entertain that weekend because I have travel with work. I'll be in
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, Georgia. And he goes, well, why don't I fly to Atlanta? And I'm like, well, I got work. He's like, well, okay. That kind of thing.
Love it. Love it.
You know, so he
Love
was,
it.
when I say he was consistent and I watched what he did, everything was, if you would allow me to, I'll come see you. It was still out of respect and reverence for who I was.
Love that. Love that.
He made his intentions known. He was committed to what he wanted to do, but at the same time, he never made me feel like he was pushing me to do anything.
I love that.
So that was another thing. I was like, this man, that kind of thing.
I love that. I want to get to this one more thing, and like I said, we went over our time, but that's okay. I love when you talked about in there in your book that, and I paraphrase Leah, and you can, I'm sure you'll, because you wrote the book, um, talk about your boundaries and that person respecting your time. Now you
Right.
have somebody like they'll call you at midnight. To me, that's not respecting your time.
No,
They
it's
know
not.
you got off of work. They want to just do things. And that's what I thought about. You know, you talked about the time and respecting the boundaries and different things like that. What would you say? And this is a takeaway. And what would you say to those women or those that are looking on about how crucial or vital to prioritize your time, respect your time as well as respecting him, and to be on your time, like you said. He always said, if you would like me to be, gave the
Right.
permission button to you,
Yeah.
you know, even though it was your permission, but he was letting you know, if it's your will, I will.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So what would you say to those women out there that, you know, if the man keep you up late hours, you got red circles around your eyes and you're trying to get some sleep from work and they still pushing the envelope. What would you say to those folks out
I believe that if you have to constantly remind a person of what it is that you need, then they obviously just don't get it. I believe if a man is truly choosing you and pursuing you, then he's doing what it takes to win you over in respect for who you are. So if I've got to constantly tell you that I need to be in bed by 10 because I got an early morning, and every time I say that over and over again, you constantly calling all times of the night, with no regard for what I said, that's disrespect, and that's a killer for me. It was just that's just a no, no, that's a no, no. It's
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to keep having the same conversations with you over and over again. So either you just don't get it or you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't get it and you can't comprehend what I mean, then you're not the person that I need to have in my life to lead me, because I'm going to have to constantly lead you because your comprehension is, lacking. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you are totally disregarding what I feel, then I can't have you as a person leading me either, because I'm not priority. I'm not important. You don't
Mm-hmm.
value who I am as a person. So I think it goes back to what I said at the onset, Miss Ellen. If you don't set the standards for your own life and stand firm on those, people will take advantage of you. And as soon as you start um, giving them the exception, giving, bowing out, well, I did have this as a standard that's important to me, but I'm going to let it go. For him, you find yourself giving up more of who you are. And at the end of the day, you've given up everything and he's given up nothing. And now you're not
Mm-hmm.
even a true representation of who you are. I'm a Christian. My faith is important to me. I respect everyone's decision to believe what they believe, but I didn't want to make a decision to be with someone who wasn't a Christian. And then why would I do that and then be frustrated? Now we're trying to raise our children, and I want them to be Christian, and you want them to be something else, and now we got chaos
True.
in the household. So there was just certain things that were like non-negotiables. These are
Mm-hmm.
non-negotiables. These are the things I would like, but these are definite non-negotiables. We have to be, as women, decide what those non-negotiables are and don't bow down to them. And if you have faith and maintain a positive attitude and do what it is, that if I have this list of 8 things that are my non-negotiables, I'm bringing those same non-negotiables to the table, and I just believe that it'll all work out in your favor. We concede to a lot because we are lonely, because
Mm-hmm.
we're
Mm-hmm.
hurting, because we want to fill a void, and it's nothing wrong with that, but we go about it the wrong way. We don't do it with our value at the forefront. And that's why we end up being confused and disappointed, I believe.
I love that. I love it. What a good closing. Tell the folks where they can meet, where they can reach you, and where can they get your book from.
My book is on Amazon at present. You can go there. And I am on social media platforms, Dr. Anissa Short. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. And on Instagram, I'm a Dr. Anissa C. Short.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Have an amazing day. That
Thank
has
you,
been
Miss Ellen.
great.
I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. See you. Have a wonderful evening.
You have a great evening too. And thanks again.
You're welcome. All right. Bye. Thank you guys for watching again. Dr. Anissa is here and we enjoyed our time here. You guys have a wonderful evening and do share, swipe, and share. And replayers, we thank you all for being here. Have an amazing night. Goodbye. I am going to close this down. I'll see you later. Thank you
Okay.
guys. All right. Bye bye.